Hi guys, welcome back. Today I want to share with you the 3 last books that I read and my thoughts on them. And I'm gonna jump straight in and firstly talk about the book I finished earlier in the beginning of this month, and that was Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. This is the last book on my 5-star predictions list, which I did, I guess, almost more than a year ago actually. So I'm glad I got through all the books on this project, and I will be filming a separate video on my general experience on setting up such a list and what came out in terms of ratings of the books that I selected. But I read this together with Madelyn from the channel MadeWithBooks, and will also hopefully be continuing discussing this with her, which is a lot of fun because I do think it's a book that you can discuss a lot. Broadly, the central plot and the central character, Grace Marks, are kind of based on a real life criminal case which happened in Canada in the 1840s, and Grace Marks was a young Irish immigrant who came to Canada with her family, and she went into the service of a man who she was then later accused of having killed together with an accomplice. This book is split between 2 points of view. We have the point of view of Grace and a doctor called Simon Jordan, and he is almost like a precursor of a psychologist, so he's very much interested in the ailments of the mind, and he is allowed to go and talk to Grace, who is still in the penitentiary, and trying to find out whether she actually committed the crime that she's accused of. I firstly really enjoyed getting to know Grace and her immigration story from Northern Ireland, and the book uses that to explore a lot of different topics. For one, there's the topic of just being a woman in the 19th century and being an immigrant and being a woman in the New World, and what kind of agency women had or didn't have. There's obviously a lot about life in penitentiaries and also in asylums, because Grace was very shortly in an asylum as well. And as you can imagine, because she is a convicted criminal, there's a lot of discussions of this clash between the view of being a woman in that time in the 19th century, clashing with this idea that this young, meek creature could be murderous. I also quite enjoyed the parts about emerging psychological sciences. So there's a lot about all the different movements that started this, including mesmerism and spiritualism, and especially the discussions between Grace and Dr. Jordan were very revealing of how different backgrounds these 2 people talking to each other have, and what views on the world they have, and what kind of privilege they possess or do not possess. And that was really, really interesting throughout the book. I enjoyed that Margaret Atwood took it as a point to try to mimic kind of 19th century writing and speech in how she wrote the book, and was also very happy of the historical accurativeness when she discusses like women's clothing and garments. The ending was perfect to me, and it's definitely not a neatly tied bow, and I think that totally makes sense in the context of the real life case and what Atwood is trying to make a point about in this book. I have to say though, it wasn't completely a 5-star read. I did think that the book dragged in places. I do think it's too long, and at the same time I also felt like it was trying to address so many different topics, and I mentioned many of them just now, but it's a lot for one book, and I would probably have preferred to have a more deep exploration of some of these points rather than having so many kind of combined in one book, and that they all kind of relate to Grace's story, which I thought was just too much. And frankly, the parts that were told from Dr. Jordan's point of view just didn't bring me enough insight in terms of topics and even in plot, because usually it was just the plot not really advancing and it was pretty much about him, and I was just not really interested in that. So this could have definitely been shortened in my opinion, but yeah, it's still a really, really good book. And if you are interested in the topics that I mentioned, and if you want a pretty poignant story of a young woman who stays really morally grey throughout the book, if you enjoy that, then definitely give Alias Grace a go. Next up, I read Agatha Christie's 3-act tragedy. I read this within the Christie Fest that is organized by my good friend Julie, whose channel I will link down below. And I quite enjoyed this. I thought it was good. I don't think it's one of Agatha's best, and it's kind of a weird one in many ways. So to start off, it is technically a Hercule Poirot novel, but he is very scarcely in the story, and he kind of comes in and out and sometimes gives some insights, but his presence is very fleeting in this book. At the same time, we have an investigation going on that involves 4 amateur sleuths, and that's a lot of people to investigate at the same time. And interestingly, one of them is Mr. Satterthwaite, so you might know him from Christie's short stories surrounding the character of the mysterious Mr. Quinn. He is the main protagonist there, and he is kind of a gentleman socialite guy who happened to be there at the time where the crime was committed. And we have a young woman called Egg, I guess that's her nickname, and Sir Cartwright, who is the host of a party at which the local reverend is killed, apparently poisoned through the glass of, I think, martini that he drinks. So that's the setup of the plot, and it's full of a really weird and random set of characters. And interestingly, a lot of them are somehow related to like acting or theater or screenplay writing, which if you've read Christie a bit, probably all your alarm bells should go off, because she is not always very nice with her actor characters. Actually, the host, Sir Cartwright, is an actor, a very successful actor. The thing is, I very quickly could determine who the murderer is, which didn't spoil the whole reading experience. It just kind of gave me a different angle of reading, because I knew who it was, I was fairly sure, and was just seeing how things unfold. And there are still a lot of twists and turns. And if you've read Christie before, you might know that she likes to sprinkle in some surprising deaths here and there. So there's still a lot to get your teeth in, and it's really entertaining up until the end. So yeah, it was a really enjoyable reading experience. As I said, not one of her best, but it's definitely a good one and a really fun one. And finally, I read John Wyndham's The Kraken Wakes. I have previously read The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham and absolutely loved it. It's such a good book, and he wrote in around the 1950s, I guess, and he writes kind of sci-fi, but like old school sci-fi. There's a lot about alien invasions and kind of how society reacts to it. And what pulled me to pick up this is that it's somehow related to like water levels rising, which kind of made it sound like it had something to do with some form of climate change. So I was immediately hooked by the premise. And in this book, we follow a couple of journalists, Mike and Phyllis Watson, and they're working for like a broadcasting agency and doing documentaries. And when they are on a cruise, there are some fireballs that start to fall from the skies into the waters. And at first, nobody really takes this seriously, but then all around the world, at the specific places where these fireballs fall down into the sea, ships start sinking and disappearing in the water. And really international events start to unfold from there. And I would actually say that in this book there's a lot about like international politics that are the fallout of all these events. There's a lot about the media and how it covers it and how different countries kind of deal with this, because it's really a global phenomenon. And you can really feel that it's been written after the Second World War, because there's a lot about like the Russians do this and the Americans do that, which I guess, you know, has to be expected in the time that Wyndham was writing in. But I still found these explorations of how different countries deal with it and the kind of propaganda that the media is spreading really interesting and really horrifying at the same time. Though I did feel like it was slowing down the book a lot, and at times it felt a bit too much. So that's like my main critique point, I think, of this book, is like the whole politics and journalism part was a bit too strong for me, and I felt like it dragged down the plot a bit. But the plot picks up again really fast, especially in the third part of this book. It really kind of turned into a kind of post-apocalyptic feel novel, which I really loved. And I enjoyed the parts of the book that really were from the point of view of the couple, the Watsons, a lot more, because I felt really closer to the action and closer to the events. If you've read The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, which is also a super, super good old school sci-fi book, this kind of has a similar feel to it, and this is something I really, really enjoyed. So yeah, if you like John Wyndham already, or if you know you like old school sci-fi, this is definitely a book you should check out. Alright guys, these were the 3 books that I read recently. I've been a bit sluggish with my reading this month, and probably the heat has something to do with it. So yeah, I hope you're able to stay safe and cool. I'm really, really excited for the Zola read-along that I'm going to host in September, so I'm kind of really looking forward to that. And yeah, hopefully by then it's going to be a bit colder here and we'll have some normal temperatures. I hope in the meantime that you're reading great books, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!